The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL. From the South Stands, it's the Broncos squad. Everything Denver Broncos every week.
A win is a win, gentlemen. It is a 10-7 win for the Denver Broncos as they take down the Las Vegas Raiders on Thursday Night Football. Short week, but the things that you and I discussed, like Nick, you, and Cody all talked about it in the press box today leading up to the game, like this was going to be, style points kind of mattered, I felt like, in this game. And unfortunately for the Broncos, there was not many style points. We'll start with you, Nick, your initial thoughts.
Woo! Yeah, it was kind of a episode of Benny Hill, and there were so many fumbles, tweaks, and so many things that I can't really put into words to describe what it was that I actually saw. It was almost like watching a baby giraffe born for the first time, trying to stand on their own 2 feet. That's how bad it was tonight. Now, you know what? I mean, I expected more from the Broncos today because I went on record as saying, hey, the Broncos, this is going to be a get-right game for them. We're talking about 45 points. Man, boy, I should have took the under on that one. But highly disappointing in what I saw tonight. How about you guys?
Yeah, and, it's strange, right? Because they're 8-2. They're on a 7-game win streak, and it doesn't feel like that right now just because of the way that the offense is playing. And, Cody, you're a defensive guy, with your experience playing football and whatnot. I mean, the defense is absolutely, as you alluded to, the David Goggins line. Who's going to carry the boats? Right now, it is the Denver Broncos defense.
They're carrying the boats. I mean, they're doing overtime there. I mean, they're going back. They're lapping the offense in terms of carrying the boats to where they need to be. Nick knows this, having played on a really great defense. I know this. I've played on really great defenses. At some point, and I've played on great defenses where we didn't have the best offense, right? At some point, that's going to start to boil over. And I don't think it's gotten there yet, but there was a little bit more of a vibe in the locker room where, offensive guys were saying we have to play better. J.K. Dobbins, I felt like, had probably the best answer out of everybody, saying that, we this is not what we should play like. This is not what fans expect us to play like. And then you got defensive guys that said, it's working right now, but if we get to the postseason, we can't keep playing this way. And Denver is on track to make it to the postseason, but they can't play like this. This is going to sink them very, very early. They would be one and done if they play like this on the offensive side of the ball and special teams. What blows my mind about this, gentlemen, is the fact that this Broncos defense was literally handed the worst starting field position throughout the entire game. They gave up 1 touchdown, but then they tightened that grip a little bit. They overcame so much in tonight's win, which, look, 8-2 is great. Best record in the NFL, great. But it's not sustainable if this team is going to reach their goals of winning a Super Bowl or even winning a playoff game. This isn't it.
Yeah, I mean, they play Buffalo in the playoffs. They play Kansas City in the playoffs. Heck, they play Indianapolis or Pittsburgh. I ain't picking the Broncos. And look, I'm just not being a homer right now. It's just like the offense is absolutely abysmal. And, the punting
Cowboys fan.
Well, don't out me like that, brother. You know how I feel about that organization and that team. I could do 7,000 eons worth of shows on that organization. But, because of that, I feel like I could be a little bit more objective about it. And, it feels like the Broncos right now, I think we talked about it a bit in the last show. Like, I don't think they are what their record says they are. And I know Sean Payton got a little chippy with a reporter there after the game who was, kind of feeding into that dynamic a little bit. But there are some real problems, and I think evident, and we'll dive into this much later on in the program. I looked ahead. The Broncos are 3.5-point home underdogs for when they take on the Kansas City Chiefs. That's the look-ahead line. So,
yeah. It's Andy Reid coming off the bye week. Look, Denver gets a mini bye, but Nick, you're a former player. You've been part of bye weeks. How good is a bye week for a team at this juncture of the season? And sometimes can it lead you into like maybe falling into a trap? It's like, hey, we haven't played for a week. Is there any rust associated with that? Like, what is your thought on playing a team that's coming off their bye week?
Well, there's two schools of thought. In this case, let's talk about what the Broncos are right now. They need to get away from football just a little, but you worry about whatever momentum that they've built up at this point, them possibly losing it. I mean, you're talking about Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and we all know the data, the statistics say that, after a bye week, Kansas City typically plays pretty well. And then watching the Broncos not really do well in the first three quarters, and here it is again in the fourth quarter, where everyone was like, hey, wait till the fourth quarter. That's when they're going to turn it on. And then the faucet never came on. So you have to wonder, what this team is going to be like when they come off this bye week, because this is going to play in their heads. They're going to say offensively, we did not really show what we truly think we are on Thursday Night Football in front of the world. And the defense is saying, you know what? We balling out every single week. So right now, Cody, I know everyone is saying the right things inside the locker room, but I've been here before. I've seen this movie. It's going to get to a point where, as they say, pressure bursts pipes, and someone on defense, they're going to do exactly what Chase Brown did with the Cincinnati Bengals when he called out the defense. Someone on the defense is going to say, to hell with this, and they're going to call out the offense, and they're not going to give a damn about the rat that's going to come from Sean Payton, because what can he really actually say?
Yeah, it's interesting because they're winning, right? Like, I think you would have seen those comments maybe surface a little bit, of that frustration maybe come out a little bit more if they were losing these games. But it's so weird that we're talking negatively or down on a team that currently has the best record in the NFL, right? But it's just, it feels a bit 2022 Vikings-esque, right? That team that was led by Case Keenum with a good defense, and they fell apart. In the NFC Championship game, they obviously had the Mile High Miracle, what do they call it? Not Mile High Miracle. I forget what it's called, but you know what
Minneapolis
I'm talking about.
Miracle.
There you go.
Yeah,
Minneapolis
2017.
Miracle. 2017. Sorry, I don't know where my head's at.
You're old, brother.
Brother, I'm like 5 years younger than you. I don't want to hear it. No, but point being, like, I think it's really interesting, the reality of the situation with the Broncos with regards to their record, but the emotions that go along with that, Cody, because I don't think anyone in Broncos country, I see we got a comment here, a lot of teams would love to have 8 wins right now. In fact, every team would. I agree with that, but I don't 100%. Think anyone right now is confident in the Denver Broncos big picture-wise this season.
I mean, they certainly didn't help the perspective of them playing on the national stage the way that they did here on Thursday night. Granted, look, it's a short week. Okay, that's fine, but we've seen teams piece together. We've seen a Broncos team last year when they had to play the New Orleans Saints on Thursday night. They put together a collective performance on offense, defense, and special teams on a road game here. The thing that I'm looking at with this Broncos team here is they're getting consistency from their defense. I think the identity of this team is rooted in the defense. They are the glue that is holding everything together. What is it? You have a meme, there's a water leak, and it's like the Gorilla Glue or the Gorilla Tape. They're smacking it on. That's the Broncos defense right now. And this offense hasn't even played up to the level I think we all know that they can. They have personnel, but there are things and little nuances that we're going to get into, obviously, as the show goes about here tonight, that are going to talk about some of those, what I call warts on the offensive side of the ball. And there's a lot of dirty hands on that operation. It's easy to blame Bo, but I know all those little acronym bros and with all their little charts and the data graphs, they're going through and they're saying, oh yeah, this is going to be fun for Monday's conversation. But the reality is simple. The Broncos offense, they make things too complicated for themselves. And in the same breath, they're putting the defense in a tough spot. But luckily the defense, they're answering the call.
So let me ask you guys this question, because what we're looking at is a great defense and a sputtering offense. So if I'm going to give you guys 2 teams and you tell me whether you feel the Broncos are more like team A or more like team B. Here it is. So the Baltimore Ravens with Trent Dilfer at the quarterback, or Brad Johnson at quarterback with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Which one would you say at this point in the season that the Broncos are leaning more towards? Now, both of those teams that I gave you, they both went to the Super Bowl and they won the Super Bowl. So which one?
That's tough.
Great question. That's a great question.
I feel like it's Tampa Bay. I feel like it's a little Tampa Bay-esque, in my field there. But yeah, because
like Warren Sapp on the
game,
defensive
it's so
line.
hard. Like think about this. Like, think about what the Broncos defense has done so far. Like, how many stops did they get? Or, especially like special teams. Don't even get me started on the Jeremy Crawshaw shanks that he had. Luckily, he bounced back later on the game. But how many times did the Broncos defense start on the wrong side of their own 50, and it had nothing to do with what they did? It had everything to do with offense going 3 and out, special teams not coming up to par there. And obviously, the punter for the Raiders almost had an MVP-like performance with his leg, pinning the Broncos inside the 5 a few times. I look at what this defense overcame here on Thursday night, and it's the bright spot. Like, it's the highlight of an 8-2 team right now, and they're fun. And they're on a historic pace, though, gentlemen. I think we definitely got to highlight that. 63 sacks last year in total for this team. They're at 46 right now. They had 6 sacks tonight, and they are, what was the next closest team to them in terms of sacks? The Detroit Lions have 28. That is unbelievable.
That's
right
wild.
here.
Yeah, it's an otherworldly defense. And to answer your question, Nick, I'd probably lean towards Tampa Bay myself. I mean, you're talking about 2 teams that had really stout defenses, right? Like Ray Lewis and company in Baltimore. And I look at Tampa Bay, right? That was John Lynch, Rondé Barber, Warren Sapp up front.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there were some players on that team. And, that's that was Gruden, and I'm forgetting Brian Billick, right? The head Brian Billick, I believe, was the head coach for Baltimore back then as well.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious to get your opinion, Nick.
Well, for me, I'm leaning more towards Tampa Bay because I'll say that Brad Johnson had a little more skill set than Trent Dilfer. Now, that Baltimore team also had special teams as well. That's something that the Broncos really don't have right now. And once again, my father used to say, you never miss the water till the well runs dry. And I've always felt as though thus far this season, even last season, Marvin Mims was underappreciated. I bet you appreciate him now, right?
Yep.
Because the numbers and him setting the field from a special team standpoint, it's not there. But also, I got another question for you guys because I heard this a lot. And I hadn't even had a conversation with my wife because, yes, was it windy at the game tonight? Yes, it was. But the Crawshaw issues with the punt were blamed on the wind, right? The wind.
No.
I was like, no, telling my wife, no. Let me show you the video so it is not the damn wind.
You should have seen the text message my wife sent me. She sent me a text. She says, "Is Crawshaw sick?" And he's Australian. She goes, "Is he down under?" I was like, "Oh, it's clever." She pulled the clever one out there. I was like, "All right, hey, that was a good." Like, I was on one in the press box today. I was.
Oh, you were.
Cody, euphemisms left and right. We got to mic myself up there in the press box sometime. I feel like I was just on one.
Yeah, you got to come sit with us during one of these home games, Nick, because it's free entertainment sitting next to this guy with his one-liners and whatnot.
Out, man. I don't want to get kicked out the press box because there's a certain level of decorum you're supposed to have in the press box. But if it's to the magnitude of you saying what Cody behaved like today, we're all getting kicked out.
Yeah, and it's all in good fun, right? At the end of the day, it's all in good fun. And look, man, at the end of the day, it's a win, right? And it's I feel like we're going to talk about the defense here in the next segment, so we'll be pretty positive there. But when it comes to the offense, there is a lot to unpack and just a lot of questions that need answers right now. And real quick, to go back to the win dynamic, I was sitting there in Evan Ingram's scrum after the game, and he was asked about that, and he essentially kind of shrugged it off. It was like, no, like that did not really factor into the way that this game played out for the Broncos on offense. And frankly, it's a team offensively that's still searching for their identity. Like, I think they have a guy in J.K. Dobbins that, is a lead back type of guy. He's been one of the better running backs in the league, right? You feel okay about their wide receiving core, but a lot of it comes down to Bo Nix. And frankly, even more so, I think it comes down to the play calling, Cody.
Nick, how many carries did J.K. Dobbins have in the first half?
He had 4 carries for 24 yards, and his longest was about 13 yards. Now, here's what's interesting about these particular numbers, because I had to go back and check. I was like, wait a minute. It was almost like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Like, I've seen this before, right? So in the Houston Texans game, guess what it was at halftime? 4 carries, 24 yards. His longest was 13 yards.
Crazy.
And I started telling myself, prepping myself, okay, Nick, based on these numbers, here's a couple of things we know. Sean's not running the ball as much as he should, but also wait to the fourth quarter, right? That's when the other shoe is going to drop, but the other shoe never dropped. So I don't get it.
The NFL season is rolling along and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for this weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet in the moment, whether it's player props, a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick. It's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
The Raiders take down the Raiders on Thursday Night Football, a game of self-inflicted wounds.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast.
There's a lot to get to. Man, there's a lot to get to. This is a game, as I was doing my ESPN radio show Game Night, I just kept saying each and every time that I was talking about the game, like, this is just an ugly game by both teams. Like, make no mistake about it. The Raiders defense did their job. The Raiders defense did a good enough job to win the game. The Raiders offense, not so much. And as I said at the opener, a missed opportunity game, a self-inflicted wound game, just something that the Raiders couldn't get out of their own way. They literally beat themselves on Thursday Night Football. Geno Smith was 16 for 26, 143 yards, 1 interception, and sacked 6 times. And the 1 interception, it bounced off Ashton Genty's hands. It wasn't the greatest pass. It was a little bit behind him, but he should have caught it, right? If he had thrown it out in front of him, it probably would have been a big gainer, but it wasn't. Instead, bounces off Ashton Genty's hands. That's an interception. Genty, 19 carries, 60 yards, and a touchdown. He was cooking early. Penalty on Jack Besh. Boom. All of a sudden, he loses a 30-yard gain that he had and seemed like never was the same. Tyler Lockett, he was the leading receiver. Again, Tyler Lockett was the leading receiver for the Raiders. 5 catches, 44 yards. Brock Bowers, who should be the leading receiver, 1 catch, 31 yards. Yeah, that's it, just 1. The Raiders defense, I mentioned they did a good enough job to win the game, and they did. Caillou Blue Kelly came up with a couple interceptions. One was a terrible throw from Bo Nix, just a super overthrow. Caillou came down with the ball, even had some nice return yardage on it. And then one that bounced off Troy Franklin's hands, and Caillou came up with that one as well. So, those tip balls that normally just fall to the ground, the Raiders were able to come up with that one. So he had 2 interceptions on his own. Problem is, Raiders couldn't do anything with it. The defense held Bo Nix to 150 yards, 1 touchdown on the night, and 2 interceptions. And the 1 touchdown came on a short field, right? The Raiders decided to go for it on 4th and 5, and they got sacked, one of the 6 sacks on the night, and ultimately gave the ball to the Broncos at midfield. And Denver goes down and scores their only touchdown of the night. Normally, I'm a guy that says go for it, go for it, go for it, be aggressive. And on that time, especially with the way that A.J. Cole had been punting, where he was pinning the Broncos deep, I would have had no problem playing the field position game. So sometimes, you get criticized when you are aggressive. Other times you're criticized when you're not aggressive. This time, criticism's coming for Pete Carroll and company being aggressive, because I did think that really set the momentum up for the Denver Broncos, and they ultimately get the victory 10-7. Again, A.J. Cole did a really good job flipping the field, pinning the Broncos at the 1, at least inside the 5 multiple times, and inside the 23 times. Really good job. Now, he did get a punt blocked later in the game. I'll tell you about that. That didn't go very well, but he did a good job early on. The Raiders, they're now 2-7 on the season, scoring fewer than 10 points in the NFL high 4 of those 9 games. Lost 9 consecutive AFC West Division games. 9 consecutive AFC West Division games. Remember what we said at the beginning of the season? For this Raiders team to have an opportunity, they had to go 500 in the division. Doesn't seem like they're going to be going 500 in the division, as, again, they've lost 9 straight. The Raiders held to fewer than 30 points in 29 consecutive games. It's the longest active streak in the NFL and second longest streak in franchise history. It happened 35 times, 91 through 93, 95-game streak. So that needs to get rectified sooner rather than later. And the Raiders had 7 consecutive 3-and-outs during the game. That's just a few of the notes from the game. But let me jump into the real mistakes that happened. As I mentioned, self-inflicted wounds. The Raiders beat the Raiders. The Denver Broncos defense, obviously they had a little something to do with it. Coming into the game, you knew that they had the number 1 defense. You knew that they can get after the quarterback. They did. Again, they sacked Geno Smith 6 times. They even injured him late. He had a quad contusion, according to head coach Pete Carroll, and barely was able to walk. Kenny Pickett got in there for 1 play, and Geno Smith came back into the game. But an interception bounced off Genty's hands. Wasn't a great pass. Still bounced off his hands. Should have had it. The 6 sacks that I mentioned. 11 penalties. The Raiders had 11 penalties for 83 yards. A blocked punt happened with A.J. Cole. A missed field goal. Cash Money Carlson. We really can't call him Cash Money Carlson because, again, Last week, he missed the extra point. This week, he's missing a field goal. Field goal would have tied it. It was only a 48-yarder, very much in his range, and it went wide right. That just can't happen. Had a touchdown called back by penalty. Dante Thornton Jr. called for a pick play. And he, put his hand on his chest when it happened, so he knew that it was on him. Shouldn't have done that. A rookie, another rookie mistake. They went for it, as I mentioned earlier, on 4th and 5. They failed to get it. Gave the Broncos the ball at midfield that led to their only touchdown. Geno Smith with a quad contusion. Could hardly work. JPJ, he went down, right? He went down with the ankle injury. Pete Carroll said after the game it's going to keep him out for a while. Something to pay attention to. Kappa, Putnam ended up into the game as guards JPJ and Dylan Parham both went down. 70 yards of offense in the second half of the game. And oh, by the way, Ashton Genty had a 30-yard run called back because Jack Besh got called for holding on a holding call that he wasn't even close to the play. Had nothing to do with the play. And I know that you can get called for holding on every play of the game. I mean, it happens, but this was just a bad one. And again, another rookie mistake. So both rookie wide receivers, Jack Besh and Dante Thornton Jr., made big-time mistakes. Oh, by the way, right before half, Dante Thornton Jr. had a 45-yard, what would be a pass and catch, go right through his hands, right? That cost some potential points right before halftime. So again, so many mistakes that this Raiders team made. And when you come into a game and you're 2-6 and you are struggling to figure out how to win games and finish games, you're not allowed to make all those mistakes that I just rattled off. Now, again, it was not a clean game by either team, right? The teams had a combined 22 accepted penalties. That's the first game with more accepted penalties than points since December 10th, 2023. A game where the Vikings won 3-0 against the Raiders, where they had 9 combined accepted penalties. 15 drives in this game resulted in punts. So if you didn't watch it, you didn't listen to it on the radio, and you're just really going through it, hearing what I'm saying about it and recapping it, you missed 15 punts on the night. The Broncos, 10 points, the fewest by any team in a win this season. The 17 combined points in this game are the fewest in a game this season. Right? So that summarizes it right there. The Broncos didn't play a clean game, but they played clean enough to win. Right? And so ultimately they improved to 8-2, so they're feeling good about themselves, where the Raiders are saying, man, an opportunity was missed because the defense did their job, right? Adam Butler was able to get a sack. Charles Snowden was able to get a sack. Caillou Blue-Kelly got those 2 interceptions that I was talking about. They held the Broncos to under 100 yards rushing. Like, if you had told me that they were going to do that and Bo Nix was only going to throw for 150 yards and have 2 interceptions and only 1 touchdown, I think that that's a recipe for a Raiders victory. Instead, they lose 10-7. So just all in all, not a very good performance. They gave themselves a chance, but they did not play clean enough ball to win the game. So now that they're 2-7, now they don't have another game until they close out Week 11 against the Cowboys at Allegiant Stadium.
The NFL season is rolling along, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for this weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet in the moment, whether it's player props, a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. The Packers want revenge against the Philadelphia Eagles, while the Eagles want to keep atop the NFC.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Lou, I feel like we've done a million of these because we got to do a couple last year. Maybe we'll get to do a couple this year. Who knows? And for Philly, these are kind of 2 teams a little bit moving in opposite directions, given the way Philly went to their bye week, and then the Packers coming off, by the odds makers, the worst loss that they've suffered since 1970, since they've been tracking this stuff. But I think you and I would say most NFL media at least believe the Packers and the Eagles are going to be there when it matters at the end of the season. What is keyed the resurgence of this Eagles offense, I think, in particular?
Yeah, I think over the last 2 games where Jalen Hurts has put together, I think 2 of the most complete performances I've seen from his career in the regular season against Minnesota and against New York. They've been going a lot more under center. Kevin Patullo is starting to get into a rhythm as a new play caller, kind of finding this offense's identity under center, play action, utilizing heavier personnel up front with 6 offensive linemen. It really seems like it's helped ignite both the passing game vertically and the run game. And that's not normally something the Eagles have done with Jalen Hurts as a quarterback. He's more comfortable in the shotgun, but I really do think it's kind of revived both areas of their offense over the last 2 weeks, and I would expect that will continue against the Green Bay Packers, even with A.J. Brown coming back. I just think that is really allowing them to be multiple and balanced right now, which they were not through the first 6 games of the season when they were 4-2.
It feels like the more mature approach to me, like an evolution of this offense, because early on they were so RPO heavy, so reliant on being able to run zone read and kind of a version of a college offense and using Jalen Hurts' legs. It was such a benefit. But as teams have gotten onto that, it seems like the Eagles want Jalen to run a little bit less out in space unless he's a scrambler, like fewer designed runs. And so if you're going to do that and not attack the middle of the field, which Jalen doesn't love to do anyway, the intermediate part of the field, which Jalen kind of doesn't want to do anyway, it seems like this is such an obvious way to get there.
Right. And
it has required an evolution of the scheme, right? Like Kevin Petullo's had to make changes here. And it seems like every year, you and I love, and me in particular, love to sort of make fun of Nick Sirianni about what do you do here exactly? But they've been able to find some of these different things like, hey, let's try something else. We know we can get to these big A.J. Brown go balls and Devontae Smith posts, and Jalen Hurts is such an accurate deep ball thrower despite not having the strongest arm, that this seems like an evolution that I'll be honest, like not every team would say we're going to fundamentally alter the way that we play offense to try and get a spark here. And they've done that. I think they deserve a lot of credit for that.
That is one thing that Nick Sirianni does really well, is he doesn't really he's not stubborn in his laurels and his philosophies.
Yeah.
And that's something that last year also allowed them to go.
Philosophy. He's not the play
maybe
call.
That's part of it, but I mean,
and I say that tongue in cheek, but I think that matters here because it's not his offense. It's not his baby. So he doesn't have to be precious about, no, we have to run this way.
Yeah, I think the open-mindedness, the self-awareness of this organization from top to bottom is really a strength that people don't talk about enough. Like even Howie Roseman, I feel like as the general manager, constantly changes his roster building philosophies. Nick Sirianni as well. Like last year when they were 2-2, they were throwing the ball a lot, and then they were the most run-heavy team in football and helped them win a championship. So this year as well, they are kind of changing on the fly, and that's something that a lot of teams, a lot of coaches, I don't think would be willing to do. So it is a necessary evolution. I am somebody that I do like when a coach plays to the strengths of his personnel, right? But eventually, like you said, teams have you figured out. They have what Jalen Hurts does best figured out. You do have to also force your players to evolve at some point. And I do think that Jalen Hurts looks really comfortable under center over the last 2 games. Again, he had a perfect passer rating against Minnesota, and I thought against the Giants, that was the most complete performance he's had all year. So Jalen's evolving with it, and again, like I said, I think Monday night against Green Bay, you should expect more of that coming out of the bye week.
I think if the Packers don't, they're making a mistake. I think that there's just like no way around that. The other side of the ball, and we're going to dig into these matchups, guys, don't worry. But the thing that has surprised me, Lou, is this defense just doesn't look the same, and they can't bring hockey waves of pass rushers at you the way that they used to be able to. That's why you go out and you get Jalen Phillips. I know Nolan Smith has been dinged up, Jalen Carter in and out of the lineup, whether it's for injury or spitting on people. There's been some issues there. Yeah. But that cornerback 2 spot, they're making some, again, they're not afraid to make some big changes. Is the Cooper DeJean outside corner thing here to stay? Is that the plan?
I think that's one of the ideas, but I do think Howie Roseman just said, here, Vic Fangio, you're maybe the best defensive mind in football. Here's a bunch of options. Go figure it out. I think Jair Alexander coming in, though, gives them some optionality with DeJean maybe still staying in the slot. And I know Alexander in Green Bay, and he didn't play much in Baltimore, but a lot of the time he was playing inside. But I do
think in Baltimore when he was playing.
Yeah, it wasn't good. But unlike Michael Carter, I do think he has a little more inside-out versatility. And with Jacorian Bennett coming off injury as well, injured reserve, they might still try to make it work with DeJean in the slot, but bringing in both Carter and Alexander does give you a lot more slot experience that, DeJean, at least for 2025, could play on the boundary. Now, I don't want that for him long-term. I don't think it fits the player the best, but I think for the team, that's probably the best combination of players you could have out there is DeJean Quinyon Mitchell on the outside, and then Carter or Alexander in the slot. So again, they kind of had to do that. That was the last shoe to drop, the last hole in this roster. I said this could really hurt them in a playoff game. Yep. Having an Adoree Jackson or a Keely Ringo out there. They don't have Darius Slay this season. That could have been the Achilles heel that maybe cost them in a crucial moment. And now, not saying that they fixed it and brought in like another Darius Slay type of player, but there's more options. And that's what I always respect about Howie Roseman, is that he doesn't really sit on his hands like some other GMs.
Yeah, Packer fans are going to take that as a shot against Brian Gutekunst, so that's okay.
I was actually doing more of a dig at Brandon Bean, who yelled at my brother for daring that suggestion.
That's right. That was your brother.
So, yes, that was a dig at the AFC.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
All right, we accept the dig at the AFC. No,
yeah.
You can't really say that about Brian Gutekunst anymore, right? Because he went out and he made the Micah Parsons trade.
Right.
And this is a team that Micah has had success over the years against. He and Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata are no stranger to one another. And those are heavyweight fights every time. And so he's coming off his least productive game as a pro. I expect a revitalized, a refocused Micah Parsons. He's just too good a player to not, like the 3-sack game the other week. He's just too good to be kept down for any length of time.
Right.
The other side here is interesting to me too, because the Packers have been seeing a lot more two shell. Early in the year, it was single high, and the Packers were like, okay, we're going to throw it over your head if you're going to play single high. Jordan Love had the highest 8 out in the league. He had an 8 out over 12, I think, through 2 weeks, which is just like bananas.
That's ridiculous.
And that was never going to be a thing that you could sustain over the course of a whole season. But this is the kind of defense that's going to do the same thing. They're going to put a lid on everything and make you drop everything underneath. That's just the reality of the way that they want to play defense. Why has it looked so different, though, this year?
I think for the Eagles, again, it's personnel change, right? I don't think they can always do the same things. Now that they don't, for instance, at cornerback, they don't have a Darius Slay, they've had to use some more man coverage where Quinyon Mitchell is shadowing top receivers. He's done that a lot more. Like you've seen him travel with Emeka Egbuka, Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua when they played Los Angeles, like Cortland Sutton when they played the Denver Broncos. That's been something consistently that they're doing with Quinyon Mitchell. And again, I think it's
overall, this week. The Packers don't have a guy like that.
See, that's the thing. It's been normally when they're playing an offense that has one truly elite playmaker, or at least one guy they're going to force feed. Like a Malik Neighbors before he got hurt with the Giants. There's not another true number 2 there to worry about, right? No. So I think Fangio, again, he has a clear philosophy and scheme that's been set in stone for a long time. But I also do think he's really good at adjusting on the fly based on the strengths of his personnel. And this year's defense is young and it's a lot of inexperienced players. So I think that's why it's kind of had to change. And also, Peter, it's too, their front four isn't hitting home as much as it has in years past, as you alluded to earlier. The reason Williams they had to bring in Jalen Phillips, they've had to bring in more blitzes, like using Zach Bond and Jihad Campbell as pass rushers. So they haven't been able to, I think, play exactly the same way as last year. And that's part of why Howie did what he did last week.